The hum of the courtroom settled around me, like a heavy weight pressing down with each passing second. I sat still, my hands tightly clenched in my lap, the image of her face playing over and over behind my closed eyes. Tanya, my wife, or at least a woman I once thought I knew. The divorce proceedings had been messy from the beginning. Her lawyers, like vultures, tore apart the life we had built together, hoping to drain me of everything. But I knew what to expect. They tried to paint me as the villain, the one responsible for the end of our marriage. For the last 4 months, I had been surviving on nothing but the bare essentials. I hadn't slept or eaten, just merely existed. When they told me she had moved on, I thought it was to a new place, maybe back to her mother's. I never imagined she had moved on with someone else. But today was different. Today, she would have to face me and answer for the accusations I had made against her. Infidelity. The word felt like a punch to my stomach when I whispered it to my lawyer. Not because of the word itself, but because it had become an undeniable truth. I never wanted it to be true, but here we were. When Tanya spoke to the judge, her voice was calm, almost serene. "I have nothing to hide, Your Honor," she said, her eyes never once turning toward me. I wanted to scream, to tear apart the calm mask she wore so easily. How could she sit there so confidently after everything? The audacity was shocking. My lawyer, Mr. Thompson, gave me a small, reassuring nod. I tried to steady myself. I trusted him. He was meticulous and thorough. He had promised me the evidence would speak for itself. Then, the courtroom door opened, and a man I hadn't seen before stepped in. He was tall, with a serious face and tired eyes. He carried a simple manila envelope. It was Mr. Ramirez, the private investigator I had hired. Tanya's face drained of color when she saw him. Her hands, which had been still moments before, began to tremble. A soft gasp escaped her lips. It was the first crack in the perfect mask she had been wearing. It was the proof I needed. The knot in my chest tightened. This wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. I kept my eyes fixed on her as Mr. Ramirez walked to the stand, escorted by Mr. Thompson. He was sworn in, and with quiet authority, he began to present his findings. The judge, a woman whose face had been hardened by years of hearing stories like mine, leaned forward. The room fell into tense silence as Mr. Ramirez spoke of surveillance, secret messages, hidden meetings in the city, late-night hotel rendezvous, and weekend getaways. With every word, I felt the anger rise again, sharper and more painful than before. I had known about it, but hearing the facts laid out so bluntly felt like being stabbed over and over. The man Tanya had been seeing was Jerome, someone I had met, a friend of a friend. That stung more than anything. She had been living this lie right under my nose. I saw the color rising in her neck, creeping up her cheeks. She fidgeted in her seat, finally meeting my gaze with wide eyes, panic mixing with what might have been shame. Her world was falling apart, piece by agonizing piece. Mr. Thompson asked her to acknowledge the evidence. A set of photographs, approved by the judge, was passed around. First to the judge, then to her lawyer, and finally to Tanya. The photos weren't explicit, but they didn't need to be. The glances she shared with Jerome, the way they touched, the intimacy, it all spoke volumes. A story of betrayal that I had only suspected until now. But now it was undeniable. Tanya refused to look at the photos. Her lawyer, who had been full of bluster and arrogance just moments before, now sat silently in defeat. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her, waiting for some explanation, some defense. Finally, she found her voice. These are taken out of context," she stammered, her voice trembling. "They aren't what they seem." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Oh, please, Tanya, don't insult everyone's intelligence. I've lost everything. You have no idea what you've done." I tried to stay calm, but the rage boiled over. I saw her glance at me quickly, then look away, unable to meet my gaze. Mr. Thompson continued with his questioning. "Mrs. Carter, Can you explain the multiple trips to the Ocean View Hotel, registered under the name Mr. and Mrs. Davis? Can you explain the text messages on your phone discussing meeting Jerome there? These were deleted, Mrs. Carter. But Mr. Ramirez managed to retrieve them. She stayed silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. The judge, her expression unwavering, turned to Tanya. Mrs. Carter, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Do you have anything to say about these allegations? Tanya broke. I don't know what to say, she whispered, the last bit of her confidence crumbling. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in what felt like forever. I saw not the woman I'd married or loved, but a stranger, a liar, a cheat. The woman I thought I knew was nothing more than a phantom, a mirage born from lies. The judge ruled in my favor. The divorce would proceed with a fair division of assets. Tanya's deception was now exposed for everyone to see. It wasn't just a legal victory. It was a validation of my pain, the acknowledgement of the betrayal. It was justice. Later, as I walked out of the courtroom, I saw her standing near the entrance, her head bowed. The bravado that had been so present, so offensive, was gone. She looked small, pathetic, alone, and somehow that gave me a sense of satisfaction. I walked past her without a second glance. The bitterness still lingered, a cold weight in my chest, but it no longer consumed me. I knew she was now facing the consequences of her actions, the shame she had earned. For the first time in months, I took a deep breath, slowly exhaling all the pain and anger that had built up over the past 4 months. I might have been broken, but I was beginning to rebuild. The first step was walking away from her. I left her standing there, a ghost of the woman she had pretended to be. I felt no triumph, no joy, only a profound sadness. Sadness for the life we could have had, the love we never truly shared, and the lies she chose to live. But as I stepped out into the bright afternoon sun, I knew one thing for sure. I had finally been set free. Now, I could begin to rebuild my life. A life where I would choose more carefully, where someone would value me and the relationship we shared. It would be a long road, but I was ready to take the first step.